Hi there. I just wanted to do a quick demonstration of the effects of harmonic distortion and intermodulation distortion using voltage modular. What I've got here is two of the stock cherry audio oscillators, and I've got these set up just to be outputting a pure sine wave waveform. That's going into the first two channels of this 6-input mixer. On the third input, I've just got a DC source coming from the free ACE constants module, and the output of this mixer, those three channels, is going into, in the one case, the output mixer, so channel 1 of the output mixer, and it's also being fed to the stock cherry audio distortion unit, which is available in Nucleus. So it's all three modules. The output of the distortion unit is going into channel 2 of the output mixer, and that's just going straight to the output socket. What I've got here is the Reason spectrum analyzer. I'm running voltage modular inside the Reason DAW. I don't have any kind of third-party module which gives a decent spectrum analysis plot, so I'm just using the one that comes with Reason. So the controls I've got up here are buttons to enable and disable the two oscillators on the first mixer, and buttons to mute the straightforward output, which I've termed linear here, and the distorted output. So if I just enable the linear output and enable oscillator 1, you can see that you've got a pure sine wave tone and nothing else in the frequency spectrum. And if we vary the frequency of oscillator 1, oops, sorry. Well, if we change the frequency of oscillator 1, you can see that the sine wave goes up and down in the frequency plot. And I can do the same for oscillator 2, so if I disable oscillator 1, bring in oscillator 2, it's at a higher octave, and again you can change the frequency on it, or up here. So if I just disable oscillator 2 again, go back to oscillator 1, so we've got the linear output, and as I said before, all you have is this single frequency at the base frequency of oscillator 1. If I now switch off the linear output and go over to the distorted output, you can see that there's a slight peak here, and if I just change the frequency of oscillator 1, you can see just creeping into the bottom there's another frequency, and what this is the odd harmonics of the distorted sine wave which are coming through here. Because it's a symmetrical type of distortion, i.e. positive voltages are distorted in the same way as negative voltages, you're getting the odd harmonics as the distorted sine wave tends towards looking like a square wave. In fact, I'll just add in an oscilloscope module here. And if we just look at the waveform that's coming out, so you can see that it still looks very much like a sine wave, but it is actually starting to get a bit more flat at the top and bottom. If I change it back to linear, there's not much visual difference between them, but there's enough that you can actually detect some sidebands, some harmonic frequencies coming through in the distorted signal. So if I increase the distortion amount here, you'll see that it starts to work towards a much flatter signal. So it's starting to be flattened off at the top and bottom, and as a result there are more of the odd harmonics coming in here. So increase distortion again. You can see it's definitely becoming flatter at the top and bottom, and you've got quite a series of harmonics coming through here. If I increase the distortion more, it really starts looking like a square wave rounded off. And all of the odd harmonics are shown. If I introduce some of the DC offset, that will make the distortion asymmetrical, and what you should see is that the even numbered harmonics start to appear in the display too. And if you look at the oscilloscope display, it's almost like there's pulse width modulation happening. So that's almost like West Coast synthesis. You're starting off with a basic sine wave, and you're excuse me, you're distorting it in order to generate more harmonically related overtones, making making the signal more complex. This is by comparison to East Coast synthesis, which is a subtractive synthesis, whereby you take a complex waveform like a sawtooth wave, which has all its harmonics already in it, and then you use something like a low-pass filter to remove some of the upper harmonics and make it less complex and closer to a sine wave tone. So I just wanted to illustrate that it doesn't matter if you only have one oscillator, then you'll get nicely related harmonics coming in. So if I just go back to distorted wave, and if I waggle the frequency of oscillator 1, all of these harmonics, all of the overtones are related to the fundamental frequency. So you have a nice solid tone coming out of it. There's no nasty sidebands. And if I switch off oscillator 1 and bring in oscillator 2, so it's a higher frequency, but again you've got a nice series of harmonically related overtones, so you've got a nice clear signal. And if I bring down the distortion amount, the overtones start to disappear, and they're never quite fully removed, because there's still a certain amount of distortion happening even at the bottom of the range. And then you can increase them so that it almost fills the complete frequency spectrum. And if I bump up the frequency, you can see it's starting to get close to the Nyquist frequency, save that for another video. So an interesting thing happens when you've got two oscillators going into a distortion unit. Not only do you get the overtones which are related to the fundamental frequency of the oscillator, the fundamental frequency of the sine wave which is going into it, but because it's distorted, you also get the sum and difference frequencies between the fundamental signal and also all of the overtones as well. So you get a whole bunch of non-harmonically related signals, and that makes for a very messy signal, which is desirable if you're wanting like a guitar distortion unit or something like that. If you play one string, then you get a nice solid tone, but if you play two strings at different frequencies, then you get the mush of that classic distorted sound. So if I switch back to the linear output and I enable both of the oscillators, you can see that all you're getting here is just the two sine tones. It doesn't matter what frequency they are apart. As they tend to come closer to one another, then you start to hear beating between them. That's because you're getting constructive and destructive interference between the two signals. But all you're ever actually hearing is just the two clean sine waves. And this component down here at the 0 Hz is because we've got the DC offset. So if I just change that back to 0, that gets removed from the signal. So let's have a listen to what two sine waves sound like when they're distorted. So as you can see, we've got all these harmonically related overtones, but as we increase the distortion, you start to get frequency components which are at a lower frequency than either of the two original sine waves. This is because distortion is causing the generation of sum and difference frequencies. So as they get closer to one another, you get some very low frequency components coming through because the difference is quite small in terms of frequency. Follow this peak, you'll notice that as I increase the frequency of oscillator 1, it actually moves downwards because it's a difference frequency. Sorry, I should have spotted that one. So as I turn the frequency down, it's going up the way. As I turn the frequency up, it's travelling down the way. some frequency components which are actually lower than the fundamental frequency of either. And there we have it. So that was a look at harmonic distortion on a single sine wave oscillator, which generates a series of harmonically related overtones, and also what happens when you perform harmonic distortion on a mixed signal. So hopefully you'll be able to take something away from that. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.